Okay, great. Okay, so I see Cherie and Anishka has put on the cameras. Thank you so much. The two most important cameras to be on. Um, so today it's going to be a little bit different than our usual format where we have presentations and slides and all sorts of things. So today is all about practicing listening. And I really hope that you are going to hear and listen and take to heart what these two lovely ladies are going to share with you. So today, it's a big privilege for me to have one of my patients, Anishka, to join us, as well as Cherie, a clinical psychologist that works very closely with me in private practice in supporting our breast cancer patients. And I think this is something that we don't cover in our normal medical curriculum, but it is absolutely essential that we understand the psychology of the cancer patient. So breast cancer obviously being the focus here, but I think what they will tell you, what they will speak about is applicable to all cancer patients and even to other patients that's facing very hard chronic diseases, that is in a healthcare system where they have very little control, that's got a lot of personal stuff happening in the background, and what's happening with their health is just kind of the cherry on top. Um, and I think me giving you a lecture about it is not as useful as hearing it from somebody that has experienced it firsthand. So, Anishka, thank you so much for being willing to be vulnerable and open and share your story with us. And then, Cherie, thank you so much for bringing your expertise as a clinical psychologist to the table to help these young future doctors understand how we can actually promote and facilitate not just cure for patients, but healing. So you all know me harping on about this all the time, that there is a difference between curing someone of a disease and actually facilitating healing for them, so that they come out on the other end, not just without the disease. And many times diseases, it becomes a lifetime companion, and how we can facilitate as doctors, as healthcare workers, that it becomes an enriching experience for them. So this is what tonight is all about. Okay, so how we're going to do it, very informal, and I really want, you've got the two experts here, so please ask questions, um, put it in the chat if you don't want to put up your hand. Ask if you don't understand, ask if you need more insight. And at the end of it, also comment on what you've seen, what you've observed, because obviously this is coming from the private sector, so which is a completely different ball game than where most of you are working at the moment in the public healthcare sector. But humans are humans, patients are patients. It doesn't matter whether you are in private or in public. Human needs, human emotions are universal. And I think it's very important that we understand that. So I thought we would start off, Anishka, if you don't mind, to just share your story, because you are not far in age from many of the people on this call. We've got some junior doctors, they're probably your husband's age. Um, and just how your story unfolded. Also for you guys to recognize and to realize that we often teach breast cancer as an illness of people that's older, that's already had their children, but we know that the age population in which we are diagnosing breast cancer specifically is getting much younger, where we used to see our peak diagnosis over the age of 55. The majority of our patients now are in their early to mid 40s. And then we've got many patients as young as Anishka with absolutely no genetic predisposition whatsoever that's faced with a breast cancer diagnosis. So, Anishka, thank you for bringing your valuable perspective. So, floor is yours. Tell your story from the beginning.
Thank you, Doctor. It's a pleasure to be here and an absolute honor. I think a platform like this is so important. And yeah, like Doctor said, just a small side note. Can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
sound is good.
Just a small side note. I'm married to a doctor. He's now in his ComServe. So I'm this patient and I have my own personal doctor at home, and it's weird because I feel safe, but at the same time he's a doctor and he can only do so much. Yeah, so but anyway, about me. So I did my master's in biochemistry in breast cancer research, and I absolutely have had a passion for it. Um, and then last year, in 2022, my husband was in his final year of medicine, and we were about to get married at the end of the year. And then in June, our whole life changed. Yeah, so I felt a lump. I went and I had it checked out because I was sure it was just a cyst or a fibroadenoma because I'm obviously young and I know that stuff exists. And I was adamant, just get a sonar just to check it out. And the radiologist did a sonar and she saw something in my axilla and her face completely changed, and she told me, yeah, listen, the C word, and you're allowed to cry now. And do you have a surgeon on board? And I'm like, what are you saying? Like, what? Yeah, this can't be. So literally the next morning she did a biopsy. They confirmed it was ER/PR positive breast cancer. We later found out it was HER2 as well, HER2 positive. And yeah, I had to start my whole journey. And I was so fortunate to be introduced to Dr. Ruud and her team. And I think this is obviously something that's not available, I almost want to say, anywhere else. It's a very niche pocket in private that I think can be treated like they treat this multidisciplinary team. And I also understand from the public sector that it's not always possible because the system doesn't allow it. But I could firsthand see the impact that it had on me as a patient in my treatment journey compared to what my husband says, the patients that he sees that are newly diagnosed and they go home and they get a mammogram 6 months later only. So it's a complete different story. The package that I got, I mean, I walked into Dr. Ruud's office and she gave me, I think, 4 or 5 business cards. And the one is for a nutritionist, the psychologist, the genetic counselor. And I immediately felt like, okay, this is this whole overwhelming thing that I'm going to go through, but I'm taken care of. Like they're looking at more than just my breast cancer. And if I have these tools and I can use them, or for my personality, I thought that worked well. Um, I would definitely be better off than someone just diagnosed and going through the treatment. Um, and I think also just being able to talk to doctor and she seeing me not only as a patient and a number, but seeing me, seeing my age, seeing my background, and almost using that with equipping me with what I need to go through each phase of the treatment. So yeah, then I was diagnosed. I got my 6 months of chemotherapy. It was doxorubicin and cyclophosphamide, and then paclitaxel was the second half of it. So yeah, I think 2 weeks after being married, I was bald and I looked like Nathaniel. And it was since then a whole journey because my husband had a new wife every 2 months because I looked like someone else every 2 months. But yeah, so chemo, went through that, and the whole treatment journey goes really fast in the private sector. I think a week after my chemo, or a week and a half, I had my double mastectomy. I almost felt like I'm not even recovered yet with my immunity, and I'm already gooid into the operations. And I mean, I'm so grateful for that. And I can't imagine having it any way else. And I feel so bad for the patients in the public sector that have to wait for very long. But nonetheless, and then I got, yeah, so I had my mastectomy and I got tissue expanders because I still had to get radiation therapy. So I went through that for a whole month. And then after that, I had to wait almost a year before they could exchange the expanders with the permanent prosthesis. And whilst everything going on, I had the privilege of being put into menopause because I had hormone dependent breast cancer. So I always make the joke that I have the privilege of being in menopause at the same time as my mother. And I don't think a lot of people can say that. And even though menopause it has a lot of challenges, there's a lot of things that you can do mentally to help yourself go through this thing, because ultimately all women go through it. So should be able to manage it, you know. So yeah, I think it's been a challenge being diagnosed and treated in my peak or youth. But it's also a blessing because I am strong and able to take the treatment. But with that being said, it is so much more a psychological, emotional journey at the same that it is a physical journey. And I think it's important for the doctor's team to just to know about that and to consider it with every step. And I know it's not always possible to do something about it, but just to be able to listen, I think, and to acknowledge that this is something that other patients also experience, or this is something that you can expect. Even just hearing those words from a doctor, when you experience that, it's like, okay, now I can expect to feel like this. So it's small words, small sentences. I think the time that us as patients spend with our doctor, we make like the sponge and we take everything they say, because that is 1% of what we get in our treatment journey, and we have to take that home and cling on that when we are sitting at home. So yeah, that's the short of it.
Can I pick your brain a little bit for more specifics?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm interested in, so you were 27, right, when you felt the lump? What made you go? Because there's so many patients out there that's just, it's just a lump. It's fine. Did you get any resistance from people? No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. How did it feel to make that decision? No, I need to get this checked out, or to advocate for yourself in that way? And were you scared, or were you just like, nah, it's gonna be fine?
Yeah, I was definitely it was going to be fine. Because the lump I felt, I always sleep on my stomach, and we went to another place for a weekend, and it was a different bed and it was harder. So it was by chance that I laid on my breast and I felt that it feels a bit sore, and I felt a lump that felt like almost a golf ball. And young people, we are used to having dense breast tissue. And especially, I think that time of the month, you are used to fluctuations in, does it feel more tender or more hard or more sore or whatever. And this time it was just a bit elevated in the discomfort. And then I asked my friend to feel, and I asked my husband because he was, well, still my fiance at that point, but I asked him because his medical professional opinion, what do you think? And he's like, it's probably because it's so large, it's probably a cyst or a fibroadenoma. And I think that is generally what we as young patients, and because I knew those two words exist and I'm 27, the possibility is so much higher that it's that. And if it's a cyst, they can drain it. And if it's a fibroadenoma, they probably won't do anything. But at least I'll know. And it's weird because I am the most afraid person when it comes to doctors. But this time, I just made the appointment. I made the appointment. I told myself, let's just check it out. And I just went. I don't know why, but it's not
Yeah.
also like me to be so proactive, I guess. Now I'm obviously very proactive, but then yeah.
Mm. And just so, since we're trying to zoom in on the psychology of the cancer patients and trying to get people to identify and understand what's happening, when that radiologist said, oops, like at that point at 27, what's going through your head? Is it just like a big blur? Is it like when did the penny drop? Like, what was that initial sort of?
I didn't even think the penny dropped because she told me something about a BIRAD 5, and I
Didn't
heard
know
that
what that meant.
word. I knew all the other words, but I didn't know that word. And as soon as I told my husband that word, the penny dropped for him, obviously.
Mm,
But for me, I was like, no, they still need to do the biopsy, and maybe
mm,
it can come back negative. And I think when the biopsy results came in and it
mm,
confirmed all the biochemistry of the cancer and the fact that I had to go for the MRI and CT scan to see if it has spread. I think that's the worst, the absolute worst part of the journey, not to know how far it is. And then getting that results back and doctor telling me, okay, it has spread, but if we're gonna do this and this and this and this, I remember you drew a diagram and you're like, this is the steps, let's do it. Let's
mm,
go. So I felt immediately in your confidence that I can do it.
mm,
And I think we shouldn't underestimate that because it is a very much a mental battle.
mm.
Every day is a mental battle. And you take it day by day. And you only have that day. So
Mm.
yeah.
Anishka, so there was not just the medical enormity of it, but suddenly you had to decide about children. I mean, you knew you were getting married, but suddenly we were like, well, if you're going to have children, then we need to get this done and we need to get that done because you had to go through ovarian stimulation, egg harvesting, all of that, because we know that chemotherapy can damage the ovaries. And we also knew that we would need to have you suppressed for at least 5 years, if not longer. So you were also rushed and pushed into this decision about possible family. How did that whole process feel?
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, I was so fortunate that you prioritized that because I know maybe a lot of doctors' teams, especially well, obviously for young patients, they just want to cure the patient from the cancer. But there is, and there can be so much life after that. And if you don't prioritize these small things, which is actually enormous, looking at your quality of life afterwards, um, yeah, so I was very grateful and on board from the beginning. Let's do this fertility treatment, but at the same time it was so scary because I know they stimulate you with a lot of things, and I know my cancer is hormone sensitive, and I only have this one shot and this 1 month to do this in because they want to start with my chemotherapy because it has already spread. So in this month of going through fertility, every day that I'm going through this thing then where my body needs to make eggs for some day, maybe I'm allowing the cancer maybe to spread even more. So thinking back, I can't, it feels like a blur. Um, and obviously in the day it was like a storm. But thinking back now, I can't even think how I went through that. I remember I drew myself a calendar, and every day I filled in what I did. And looking at it, I just had a look at it yesterday. It looks like there's no space to write because there's an injection in the morning, appointment in the afternoon, and feeling nauseous in the evening, and telling new people that I have cancer, and so it's a whirlwind of a time.
Mm.
Yeah.
So your cancer treatment took about a year out of your life. You had to stop working, you had to reassess kind of what you do. So
Yes.
that's also a massive assault on who you identify with as a person in this world, right?
I don't think anywhere in your life it's good to have cancer take a year of your career, but especially as a young and upcoming driven scientist, having put into this treatment bubble where you have brain fog and you don't know who you are in terms of your identity and your new you. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Yeah.
Mm. It's maybe a difficult question to answer, but is there specific moments that stand out, specific things that people say to you or didn't say to you that stood out as highs or lows, things that really helped and things that really didn't help during the journey, or specific points in the treatment process that was just particularly hard for you as an individual?
Yeah, I think I broke up my treatment journey into the different phases. So I didn't think about mastectomy while I had my chemo. And I didn't think about radiation when I had my mastectomy. I tried to break it up into different phases. And I was very lucky to have Dr. Anne Cherie to contact almost any time. And I saw, I think, both of you in all my different phases. So it was so important for me to be able to check in with you and with Cherie before the start of each phase so that I can know what to expect.
Mm,
And I think that helped me so much.
mm,
In terms of what's hard, uh, I think your support system can either make your life much easier and help you a lot, but they can also um, put a lot of pressure on you to be a certain way or to yeah, a lot of people would tell me, oh, but luckily you get a free boob job. And I think that's a common
mm,
thing that people say. And it's so easy. And I think if I hadn't gone through this, I would probably also make that comment. I think it's such a normal thing to say because we always tend to look at the silver lining
mm,
and try to find that. So I'm not angry about that, but there's a lot of things that hit home in a way that you won't understand if you're not a cancer patient. Um, what also helped me a lot was talking to other survivors, and but selectively.
mm,
A lot of survivors have a lot of stories and noise and remedies that help them, but it's not a one size fits all. So being able to filter out what you need from each person is also a skill because a lot of people tell you actually, oh, I also know someone who lived with this for 5 years. And then it's like, but only 5. So um, they try to be positive and say something positive, but doesn't always come out that way. And to be able to see that this is my story and not the other person. Yeah, so finding hope in other people, but not letting it define you. So I think that was important and also hard at times. I think also being a newly wed was very hard. Um, because I mean, us as young individuals or anyone that gets married, that you're so excited for this honeymoon phase, and definitely we both were robbed of it. And that's, I think, also the thing. It's not I think Dr. Ritt also said it in one of your videos. It's not the patient that gets diagnosed, it's actually the whole family. It's the whole, you and your partner, or you and your household, your whole support system. And I think it puts a lot of pressure on the patient because you don't want to be a burden, but at the same time, it's the only time in your life. And I think breast cancer patients, especially, that you're going to have to put yourself first. But practice what you preach is not always easy, especially when you are being torn down in ways that you couldn't even fathom going into it. So yeah, there's a lot of hard things, a lot of blessings, a lot of beautiful things that you learn from yourself and others, but it doesn't take away from how hard it is. Yeah.
So I'm almost gonna give you a break, and then we're gonna hear what Cherie has to tell. But I'm curious about two more things. The one is on a lighter note, like what strange advice did people give you, if any? Like, because I know there's like a lot of, people have all sorts of theories and advice. My oom's the broer se, da 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 da, and they kind of, everybody's got an opinion about how you should treat your cancer.
Definitely you should grate suurlemoen over everything, and that's gonna make your body acidic or basic or whatever, and that's gonna sort it out. Yeah, there's a lot of I because I come from a very educated side, and my husband also. We don't go to Dr. Google, we don't go to Dr. Facebook. So when people, I had someone actually tell me, I know two people, the one took chemo and everything, and they died 10 days later, and the other person went on this one diet and they are still alive. So for me, choosing medicine and conventional therapy with the combination of self-love and the whole spiritual journey with it, combined to that, it was weird to have people say that with so much confidence. Yeah.
And then the second thing is, so I mean, it's everything, every little step of the way for a 27-year-old to deal with it. But for you, because you also had to break bad news as a 27-year-old woman, how do you tell your parents? How do you tell people that you love what is happening to you? Like how does that feel? And was that a burden to you? Was that something scary to you? How did you navigate that?
For me, I talk easily and I express my feelings easily. So it was easy for me to say that to people or to say that to my family. I didn't want to say that to them because I know it would hurt them and make them scared with me and everything. But that was the easy part. We also had to tell 100 people at the same time because we had to cancel our wedding. So I think the amount of love also and care that I received and support, it helped really. But I also have met a lot of patients that don't even want to tell their family. And they are going through this whole journey. And I'm like, why? You need the support. You need. So I think they person to person will differ. But for me, telling people what I'm going through, equipping them is what they need to help me. That's very important for me. But I also know a lot of patients struggle with that, definitely.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks, Anishka. So don't go anywhere because we may get back to you. Cherie, lovely Cherie. So you so Cherie, you see many patients, but you've got a special interest in dealing with patients with chronic health challenges, a large majority of them being our breast cancer patients and our cancer patients. And I think as a psychologist, I think I don't know how how you guys specialize in it or if there's special training in it, but the psychology around a chronic illness is a whole different ball game, isn't it? So how do you approach it from a clinical point of view when you meet a patient like Anishka?
Sure. Thank you, Liana, for having me here. Yeah, I think with a diagnosis of breast cancer, it's such a emotionally complex diagnosis. It's yeah, it requires a lot more softer approach. And I think if we think about how what the actual diagnosis means to that patient and how it presents a range of emotions for them, from shock to fear to like sadness, anger, grief, that usually our initial session is actually around just seeing where the patient is at, being able to contain, to process the shock that they've had. I think when they hear they have been diagnosed with cancer, the initial response is, I'm going to die. And because they've heard all the stories about cancer and it equals death. So I think being able to actually help them like process like the uncertainty of the diagnosis. Yeah, and I think what the diagnosis also requires, because different stages along the way actually present different emotions and different things arise during it. And I think being able to walk that journey with them it is definitely a roller coaster. And like Anishka was saying, every patient reacts differently, and we don't know how that is going to be, like their support system, whether it's there, whether it's not there. The different stage of life that they're at. If it's a younger woman, it is their career, it's their marriage, it's whether they have children, the impact that that has on the roles in the family, and the possibility of having children or not, versus our older patients who are diagnosed. It's a very different picture. But I think the initial process of grief of the body that they had, the process that they're going through, they feel different. They feel disconnected from themselves, and yeah, I think it is just providing a process for them to be able to really understand and deal with where they're at. Yeah.
And patients have vastly different reactions and responses
Mm.
to this. So if you can just maybe, because I think part of why we're doing this is many of these young people, they will have to remember Anishka's story and they will
Yeah.
have to remember what you tell them, because there's not going to be a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
There may not even be a social worker, and they may get 15 or 20 or 30 minutes with a patient and never see that patient again, or maybe see that patient. But how can we, what nuggets that they can remember to say, this is how a patient may react, and
Yeah.
it's to be expected, and these are maybe something small, or a way that I can speak, or a word that I can use, or a message I can leave with them that can have that a high impact
Yeah.
interaction. Does that make sense? It's a very complex
Yes.
question, but you get where I'm going with this.
Yeah. I think normalizing the shock that they have and approaching it with such empathy, and just tenderness. And I think that's something that all the patients have actually reflected about their session with you, is that you listened, that you were soft, that you actually had empathy for the situation. I think being able to identify the patient's anxiety, whether there's depression features, there is a history of mental illness. I think being able to identify the stresses and the support system within that patient's life is also, I think, quite important. And because as doctors, you bridge the gap between the physical and the psychological. And I think normalizing the process of
being able to be referred to therapy, I think that is actually an important part for the doctor or the doctor's role within handling that patient. And I think you're going to be following up with them not just once, but they get that card and it's go see Cherie, and then they don't see Cherie, and then Cherie gets the phone call. Cherie, phone this patient, please. She needs you. But I think being able to see the patients are so overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed with the language of the diagnosis. A lot of them don't even know how to speak around this. So I think normalizing the role that psychology has within that diagnosis is so important. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did. And so I think for you guys, for the future is really, really utterly important, and hopefully you will one day work in a system where you can surround yourself by wonderful other healthcare professionals, where you will be able to refer patients to psychology. But I want to encourage you that while you are still in the public healthcare sector, is to advocate for your patients, because I think that is where this is why this space is so important, just because doing a referral to the psychology or the social work department is not standard and nobody else on the team thinks about it. Have the courage to bring it up and have the courage to say, but wouldn't this patient perhaps benefit from seeing a social worker or seeing a psychologist? And in the absence of that being available, to whether you get 10 minutes with a patient or whether you get half an hour with a patient, to embody the things that Anishka and Cherie has spoken about that makes a real difference. And it's as simple as being kind. It is as simple as, no matter how long the queue outside your door is, take 5 extra minutes, give a little bit more time. And we've covered this in our Breaking Bad News lecture as well, so revisit that again. But make sure your patient understands. I mean, even Anishka, highly educated PhD candidate scientist, didn't understand what the radiologist was saying to her. So making sure that you speak to the patient in the most kind, humane, simplest terms, and reflect back to them so that they can tell you, what did they hear, what did they understand, because you don't necessarily know who that patient is going to see next, and you may be the last chance that patient have to ask questions or to hear a hopeful word from, or to get tools to navigate the journey further. And this is it's a harsh reality, but I think this is why we have this platform, to slowly but surely start training ourselves to recognize ourselves as being facilitators of this process, even though we are not in the perfect system. So Cherie, if one of these youngsters have 5 or 10 minutes with a patient, like, do you have any techniques that they can apply there and then with a patient, like just to breathe, to quiet them down, to settle them, and to give them 5 things to remember at home, or to just a tiny little toolkit that these guys can use when they're in a very resource constrained environment?
Sure. I think for one, their breath, those breathing exercises, being able to calm the patient's body down. And a lot of patients don't know how to breathe correctly. So that box breathing in through your nose for the count of 4, holding for the count of 4, a long exhale for the count of 8 can actually calm them down. I think, for the patients as well, they immediately go to that catastrophic thinking. And to be able to make the link with the patient that where their thoughts go, their body follows. If the thoughts are catastrophic, if the thoughts are I'm going to die, the body is going to become very much more anxious. So I think it is being able to encourage them to stay present, to actually ground themselves. It sounds like, how do we ground ourselves? And it can be as simple as feel the chair underneath your bottom, feel the ground on your feet, just take a few deep breaths in, notice, take in the colors, use your senses to take in the environment around you. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? So it's literally just being able to tell yourself, I'm safe, I'm okay. And, you know, taking it one day at a time, there's so much power in that. We don't know, none of us know what tomorrow is going to bring, but we have today. We know the sun is going to rise, we know the sun is going to set. So it's all the decisions that we can make just today, put one step in front of the other. Yeah.
Breaking things down into more.
Breaking things down, yes, not rushing ahead. Yeah, and I think being able to also see if the patient's got a support system. Are they part of a church community? You know, do they have a good friend that's going to help them along this journey? And, you know, in government, maybe, you know, what are the resources? I know there's a church that provides free counseling services in Somerset West. I'm not sure in the other areas, but being able to have that on hand and maybe making connections with the counselors in that or the psychologists in that area. Yeah.
Cherie, and then the other thing is because there's the psychology of going through the treatment process. So there's the grief, there's very often anger that comes out, you know, why me? People, you know, lose their identity in the process. But then there's the whole other interesting thing that happens, and Anishka, maybe you can also comment on this, but it's the psychology of survivorship.
Yeah.
Where patients really struggle when they get the all clear, and it's a hard thing to navigate.
Yeah. Do you want to answer that one, Anishka, or should I?
No, I think you can definitely contribute, but the survivorship part has been tough because, I mean, for the first part of the treatment, like Dr. said, it's a whole year that you see these experts every few days in the beginning, and then every few weeks, and then it tapers off to months. And then there comes a time where, okay, they see you every 3 months for a checkup and bloods, and then every 6 months for a scan, and then it gets to a year. And then you feel like, okay, but they're not doing anything today that's treating me. So am I still fighting cancer, even though it's gone? So just coping with that, trusting and having faith in the treatment process it's much harder than I thought it was going to be. Like this past week, I had my annual MRI CT scans, and I think it's the worst anxiety that I've experienced in my life, to be honest. I actually don't know myself like this, and even though I have so much to be grateful for, and everything is in the clear, and can celebrate another year of being cancer free, it's one of the hardest things that I'm going through at this moment, because I also know it's forever going to be like that while I'm on earth. I call it, a lot of people call it scanxiety, and I do get that. So I think it's also, Cherie, you're normalizing it a lot for me, that everybody's feeling this way, and just to help yourself not that be the main focus of, because you have the rest of the year to enjoy, not to let this part become the only you that you have. But with that being said, to practice that, it's not as easy. So yeah, even though the treatment part comes and goes and you take it day by day, you are affected for the rest of your life.
I think, depression actually, it's surprising for a lot of people around the cancer survivor. They've now finished their treatment. There should be this wonderful, you know, happy celebration, and now they're back to life, and they can really hit a depression. And because that treatment is now ended, it's like the what next, and now they have to go out into their life and put themselves like back out there. And yeah, it's I think really only at that point that they start really taking stock of the loss, the changes in their body. You know, they now have these breasts that their body is full of scars, that, you know, the effects to their sexuality, their identity, their body image, their weight gain along the journey, and like all of these are now like falling into like coming to the forefront of who am I within this place. Yeah.
That everybody that has supported me over the years, and I'm so thankful for them, but every time I see one of my friends or my family members, they ask about my health and how it's going. And I think that's a normal thing to do, but you stay in this bubble of this cancer identity. And there's even people that say, oh my word, you look so good, you've made it. You've made it through the treatment. And I mean, it's true, I did make it. But I'm not through it, and it's not done, and it's not, you know, so it's definitely, it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
So there is, I mean, what's absolutely clear speaking to you and listening to Cherie, and I think what you guys know better than all of us is that it takes a mammoth interior task, actually, to come out on the other end of this intact. And I'm putting intact in inverted commas. And I think having the perspective, guys, with the patients that we see, from the socioeconomic circumstances that they come from, and not necessarily, never mind having the insight of what is happening, understanding menopause, for instance, having no resources to understand what menopause does to your body, to have then to say the luxury, and I'm putting this, please understand me correctly, but the luxury of looking inward and asking questions like, but who am I as an individual, and how does this impact my ambition? Because we're trying to just survive, put food on the table, people have lost jobs. So is to keep that perspective, is to hear and to understand what this does to a person's interior world and their mind space, and to then take that and also see it in the greater context of our patients, and realize the responsibility that's on us to, with the brief encounters that we have, that we need to see these people, like really see them, and try to make the impact that we can, you know. So I've got some really cool questions here from Reese. So Anishka, I think it's for you. So the question is, how has the mastectomy affected your identity as a woman, if at all? And what was the impact on your relationship, if at all?
Yeah, so I think the mastectomy part, I actually did not think about that too much in sense of what it was going to do to my identity. It wasn't until I talked to Cherie about it, and she asked me how I felt about it. And I was like, it's fine. I've never been someone that faffed around my breasts, and I had a lot of identity in that. But at the same time, I've always been a very active person, and liking sports, and not liking restrictions like injuries and stuff like that. So having this, all the cuts, and you know, the discomfort of the expanders and the prosthesis, and the possibility of infections and maybe losing it. I think I was obviously very fortunate to be in a team where I'm in the best of the best, and having the best results after everything, that I really can't, I can say that this is the least of it, but also at the same time empowering myself before the operation, in knowing that choosing this operation contributes to saving my life and can give me the rest of my life, to put me into the mindset of, I'm choosing this and it's not being done to me. it's definitely, that changes a lot about how I enter the operation and how I feel afterwards as an identity of someone who has lost their breasts. So I think for other women, this might be much harder than it was for me, because I could go into that mindset and I can still have a very active life and comfortable life afterwards. But it also came with a lot of hard work. I did a lot of work on getting my mobility back, training every day and getting used to my new range of motion, my new restrictions, and accepting that it's a whole journey. So and the fact that I could get prosthesis, I mean, I can't imagine if I didn't have that opportunity, how that would have affected my confidence and my identity. And the fact that for me everything worked out without complications. Not every patient get that luxury. Yeah.
Cherie, in your experience, is it something, it is a real crisis for some women that's very breast proud, and where they feel it completely shifts how they view themselves and how the world views them?
I think so much of our femininity lies within our breasts as women. It's our hair, it's our eyebrows, our eyelashes, and with the chemotherapy journey, losing that is one thing, and then the mastectomy comes, and often, whether it's a lumpectomy, women's breasts do not have the symmetry, which is actually one of the biggest things for them. And then they have scars, and I think even nipple sensitivity, how that affects their intimacy and their sexuality. It's a very real struggle, and I think body image therapy is so important in terms of trying to accept the breasts that they have and the new body that they have. And I think that also brings a new wave of grieving at the same time, because now all of a sudden they're grieving the breasts that they had that they've lost, and having to accept the new body that they are given. Yeah.
And the change of the body goes so much further than the breast, right? As you very rightly mentioned, for a lot of patients, actually, the hair loss during chemo is far more traumatic than the actual mastectomy, and the weight that you pick up with the steroids and the menopause, all of that. Yeah, it's
and the
very,
depression
very different.
the depression and anxiety that patients experience that previously didn't have a diagnosis or an experience of depression, they actually feel like they don't know who they are, and for them to try and understand that space and navigate that space, is very challenging.
Yeah. So there was one more question. Anishka, has your nutrition had to change to heal and boost your health and immunity? And has there been any challenges for you in this regard?
I definitely sought a lot of information with regards to nutrition and how it would help me during my treatment times. But I think as a patient undergoing so much changes already, and I think also being in a household, going cold turkey and going faffing over everything about what shampoo am I putting on my head now, and is it safe to what I'm putting into my body. I think it's definitely important to look at nutrition and to eat healthy and to stay healthy during the time. But during my treatment, I did not focus on, getting everything right. During chemo, it was important for me to eat when I was able to, and to what I was feeling like eating. And when I was recovering from an operation, I would then be more healthy, so that I can lower my inflammation and focus more on healing with nutrition, and also the movements of my body, and to be able to recover in that way. I was, during chemo, I think the nutrition was obviously the most scary part, because it was also the first time going through chemotherapy, but also the first treatment that I got for my cancer. not knowing how nauseous I'm going to be, and everything that you see on TV and how people lose weight. And here I was picking up weight. So it was very weird. But the doctor just told me, well, you are healthy at least. So let's just get you through this thing healthy. So I think for me, yes, it's very important to focus on nutrition and not to put any junk into your body if you can. But I mean, it's not always possible if you're a household, if you're a mom cooking for the whole family, and now you must go through the treatment. I think putting that stress on you during that time, but that's just my opinion. I think eating healthy is always important for your immune system. Yeah.
I think you summarized it perfectly, Anishka, and I think this is where sometimes, and I think this is where popular advice can get very damaging actually to patients, is that, well, I'm a strong advocate. I mean, I gave you Michelle's card as well to go see nutrition, and Fiona's card to go buy yourself some juices and whatever is, but to have the conversation with the patient that is, forget about going dairy free, meat free, this free, that free. You've got enough on your plate. You've got so much that you have to control, that is providing more than enough reason for anxiety. So stop faffing about everything that you need to cut out and see where you can add something good in, and just take the pressure off, because there's so much pressure. And then as you progress along the journey, there's more mental space and there's more capacity to start focusing on these things. And I think even for our state patients is to have that conversation, have the conversation about nutrition, but not in a demanding and what's the word, patronizing way, because many of these patients, a meal is a meal is a meal, and that is what they can put in their body. But maybe ask them if somebody has a vegetable garden where they stay, where they can get spinach that they can add to what they are already eating. Or so the addition of good, instead of focusing of now you have to do becoming like a dictator, it's actually psychologically not serving the patient. For some patients, they need that control, and it becomes almost a pathological coping mechanism by trying to micromanage and completely control every single thing. But in my experience, the bottom falls out at some point, when there's that sort of obsessive control around things. I don't know, Cherie, what your experience is around that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that, Liana. I think it's working with where they are at, and it's true what you're saying in terms of seeing what they can add in. Sometimes patients, I mean, we've had our one patient who became quite obsessive around the alternative healing modality or methods or treatments.
Modalities,
Yeah, so she ended up after a chemo having liver detoxes and coffee enemas, and Dr. Free couldn't understand why she wasn't responding as well to the treatments. And I think, it's going to the extreme in terms of trying to deal with it. And I think, it's keeping it simple, it's bringing it back to the basics. And I think you got on.
Yeah, and recognizing that desire to control something. So a lot of them will grab onto, because they feel this is something that I can control. And just as a healthcare professional, recognizing and saying, you're trying to control, and that's okay. But like Anishka, I don't know, but it feels to me, witnessing all of this, listening to you, there's such an overarching theme of surrender that needs to happen. Like for you, so you're a very spiritual person. Is that sort of how you access that surrender, or how do we help patients to get to that? And I mean, we're not going to get patients to it. It's somewhere where they need to go by themselves, unfortunately. But how do you get there, in and out? Because I'm sure it's not continuous, but
Yeah, no, it's a roller coaster, to say the least. But Yeah, and I think that I actually was only introduced to the spiritual side of the healing journey in my cancer journey, because I think with the first session I had with Cherie, we almost discovered that I was in autopilot my whole life, and that's my default setting. So even now after cancer, going back to that is so easy. And I really need to just calm myself down and to just put myself in the moment. And I think the cancer journey forced me to do that, because the only thing that you need to do today is rock up for your chemotherapy and get through this, because if you don't do this, you can't go on to the next thing. So it was the first time in my life where I was forced to slow down. But I was also very fortunate to be in a position where my work understood and I had the support at home, where, and I know people think it's bad that I went through this before having kids and everything, but I can't imagine having that another person that you need to take care of when you just need to lie in bed today and do nothing else but try and be here and go through this that you're going through. So it's definitely not a one size fits all journey at all. For me, that really helped me, but it didn't make it easier every day and every second. Yeah. I don't know if that.
No, it answers perfectly. So I think, so also, I think a large number, I think there's quite a lot of men here as well, but as a young woman talking to other young people, men and women, having gone through a cancer journey, and because you've got a medic in your house and you know how crazy things can get, is there a lesson or something that you want to depart on them to say, I don't know, maybe learn to do certain things before life forces you to have to learn to do certain things, or you just like, nah, it's everybody learns at their own speed.
Everybody has their own challenges in life, and everybody's story is different. And I think as patients, I know now that the doctor is also only a human, and they also go home to a dog or a wife or a husband or a kid. And I now also understand how much time you actually have with the doctor and what their capacity is. And it's really sad, but it's the reality of things. I mean, we can't all have our own personal doctor at home. And even having that, it's quite daunting for us both, because I don't want to be the patient all the time. So I think just my advice to the younger doctors would be, the time that you spend with a patient, it really makes a big difference in what you tell them, your demeanor, your confidence. And I obviously understand that it's not always going to be the best news that you have to, and the best prognosis that you're going to have to share. But what you tell them definitely can have a big impact in their mental space that they take home, which they then actually apply to their circumstances, to help their circumstances help them. So it really makes a difference. So if you can educate yourself more about the bigger picture around things and not just the treatment part, you can empower them to be better equipped.
Yeah,
I think
100%. I see somebody has asked, will you use your breast cancer as a drive and to advocate for breast cancer education and awareness? You're already doing that.
I would really love to be an advocate for breast cancer. And I think as a scientist, I saw that there's a very big gap between the scientist and the doctor even. I mean, I thought I understood a lot, and for my husband, I think clinically we both understand a lot, but it doesn't help you psychologically at all. And then there's also a big gap between the patient and the doctor. So I would really like to get involved in in that space. But someday it's an evolving thing. I've actually decided that I'm going to do my PhD now in breast cancer research. So I am very much excited to become even more knowledgeable in the field, and then also to join a team like doctor's team and maybe help make a bigger difference in the system someday, hopefully.
Makes my heart so glad, so happy. You're an amazing young woman. You're an amazing young woman. Thank you so much. So, guys, is there any more questions for Cherie or Anishka? Now's the time to ask. Any hands, you can pop it in the chat. Anything else?
The question about coping mechanisms. Cherie is my coping mechanism. Yeah, I think Cherie is my coping mechanism. My husband is my coping mechanism. Telling him every day how I feel, even though he doesn't have capacity to hear how I feel today, because I know he's post school or whatever. Having good friends is so important. I think as soon as you hit that depression, you just want to, because you feel so far removed from everybody around you, because your life is so different, because they don't understand how I feel. But to check in with them and to be vulnerable with them and to let them know how you feel is so important, because that's the only way they can try to understand and try to be there for you. Because going down into the dark hole is just, yeah, it's you're just getting further and further removed, where you just want to feel normal. So I think coping for me is talking about it.
And journaling, Anishka. You are an avid journal, a journaler.
I only journal when I come to you, but yes, I have to journal more. Yes, and breathing. I'm working on my breathing. And I was also introduced to yoga, and I neglect that sometimes, but it really just brings your mind to your body in a way that you can't explain. So I need to practice that more. Yeah, so there's a lot of coping mechanisms. A lot of them help you more or less in different times of the journey, but all of them are equally important. Yeah.
Wonderful. Anybody else with any comments or questions? Mish, I see you're on the line. Do you have anything? No. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, I really hope that this has been helpful, and just to give all of you like a sneak peek, behind the curtains of the mind of a patient going through this. The recording will be made available, and I think just in line with this, speaking to Anishka, I will ask Lou at some point, we'll just share some slides. So we are also the representatives of an international foundation called Breast Cancer in Young Women. So I'm the South African ambassador for that. And we are looking at establishing youth chapters on various campuses for young people to become breast cancer advocates and to become breast cancer aware and breast health aware, actually. So I think we're already doing much of this with our Flaminglet program. It will just be a matter of formalizing it. But I would love to hear your opinion of it. If you guys have the opportunity, if you would join, it would pretty much be this forum. I don't think we're going to do much extra, but to just sort of formalize and educate and keep each other accountable, to educate on our campuses that breast cancer is also a disease of young women. It doesn't discriminate in terms of age, and that young women face very, very unique challenges on this journey. It's a, it's same, but a very different journey. So we'll get your opinions about that. I don't know, Lou, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I've got the slide deck here. So I think what we could do is just send on a reduced version to everybody who's registered following this with the recording. So that's all together.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
maybe a poll with that so people can respond and give
Yeah.
us a thumbs up.
And
Thumbs up.
see, I mean, yeah, and if there's interest, and I think what's important is that it's not necessarily going to be anything besides what we're already doing. It's just formalizing it through the university that we get recognition as a chapter, international chapter of the International Breast Cancer and Young Women's Forum. So yeah, I think that will be cool. And then hopefully that will also give us the opportunity to chat to students around the world, around all things breast cancer. So, and Anishka, if you want to join us and become involved, you're super welcome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. Ladies, thank you so much for your very valuable time on a Monday evening. I really appreciate it. I know the students appreciate it, the young interns, the doctors, everybody that's here. You are, at the end of the day, the best place for us to learn is our patients and our colleagues. So we sincerely appreciate your input. Thank you so much. I hope you have a lovely evening.
You too.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you, Liana.
I've got
Bye.
your